Snowbreak is a pretty solid game with lucrative assets and a lot of cultural significance. About half a year ago, I reviewed it in the first volume of the Atrocious Gacha Review series. Since then, a lot has changed. Not only did it make a surprise comeback from the brink of being shut down, the amount of influence it's had in recent times is staggering. From having its music featured in the Olympics, to when any gacha game introduces an interactive dormitory mode, it's often referred to going as the Snowbreak route. What did it do to make a counterplay of this degree, and what can we learn from it? My name is Psyche, and let me tell you about why Snowbreak Containment Zone deserves its success. Well, I didn't think I'd be logging back into the game after half a year. After being greeted by the returning player event, I wanted to see what's different. Now, if you haven't seen the original review, I suggest watching that before this one, as you may not understand where my original opinions of the game came from and how they may have changed. Back then, I didn't have as much experience playing gacha games, so my opinions were not as informed as now, since I can definitely see some moments where I was too quick to judge it. Addressing the behemoth in the room, Snowbreak has had a huge tone shift since its launch over a year ago. Originally advertised as a post-apocalyptic 3D shooter, now has shifted more into the shameless side. Amazing CSUN Games went, "Clothing? We don't need that around here." The new version trailers, the premium cosmetics, and the previews for the character banners all showcase the cultural side of things. One of the main attractions that arguably put Snowbreak back on the map is the introduction of the animated skins costing around $20 each. Even for content like this, to the typical gamer, $20 still seems like a high price to pay for a cosmetic item. But here's the thing. When compared to the general gacha market, the price is actually not that unreasonable. Genshin's $20 skins do not offer any new voice lines or animations. Nikkei and a few others have a skin gacha, and most of the time it will cost $60. Something like this was unseen before, and before long, some other gachas started implementing similar tactics. $20 for a cosmetic item that adds this much is, well, I probably still wouldn't buy it, but after taking a look at everything else, it does look good in comparison. Snowbreak, despite being released in 2023, still had the advantage of being one of the few that went the 3D route. If I asked you, name 5 3D gacha games in 2023, you might have some trouble counting them with your fingers. Live 2D has been fairly prominent in the industry before that, since they're low weight enough for most phones to run the game smoothly. There's always been fan service in gacha games, but nothing quite embraced it fully as its identity. So much so that for the main character, there are marriages that's actually canon. Still gotta buy the wedding skins, but getting married for $20 is pretty good value. While you might think that relying on fan service is a cheap tactic, I think there's a bit more than that. Snowbreak found a gap in the market. A high-quality 3D shooter that heavily leans into the fan service side, and capitalized on it before the huge wave of 3D gacha games coming in 2025, because everyone and their mother had the same idea of going the open world route. At first, the game spelled trouble when they announced the end of the English voice acting. Global is usually the first to get budget cuts, as global gacha fans typically consists of the smallest player base and revenue compared to Asia markets. Not to mention, it seemed like the game was on its last legs when it ran a summer event during the winter, hoping to rein in an extra dose of cash by releasing some swimsuit cosmetics. The shift in the game's vision didn't happen suddenly, but if you go back and watch each version's trailer, you can see CSUN Games' slow descent into madness. Now, the new direction isn't without trouble. About a month ago, the game was caught with a wave of censorships, and for whatever reason, the global server was affected too, despite not needing to comply with the same laws in China. The other point of major contention was the removal of male logistics officers. The logistics are literally just static PNG files with a bit of lore attached. CSUN Games decided that it was for the best as an indie studio to replace all male officers with female ones in order to avoid potential drama. The idea is that since Snowbreak is very clearly designed for a male audience, Chinese players feel there should never be a reason for a female player to start the game, fearing that they may spread idea something along the lines of radical feminism and advocate to shift the direction of the game to something the majority of the players do not want. Now, gender politics is not something I want to touch with a 10-foot pole. In fact, the reason I make gaming videos is that I don't have to talk about politics. A debacle like this could potentially harm player trust and reputation of a game, especially in the Chinese market, but maybe that's a story for another time. In the end, the redesign of the logistics will eliminate any suggestions or notions of romantic interplays or rivalry between the waifus in the game in any male characters that is not the playable protagonist. What's that? Leo here is a die-hard fan of Fenny? That's a no-no right there. The result was that all servers, even global, were affected by this change. So yeah, now you can enjoy the true harem experience. The rise in popularity and revenue is one thing, but how did the game improve the last time I reviewed it? Well, let's start with the presentation. Events and main story chapters have 3D cutscenes now. Even though the live 2D scenes are not voice acted, the 3D moments do. I was able to go through some of the event story during the last week of the 2.1 patch, and I was pleasantly surprised. Even here, fan service elements feel shoehorned into almost every aspect in the game, except it's fine because of the ridiculousness and the lengths that it goes to fill every frame of your gameplay with booba, ironically makes it feel not out of place at all. It almost reminds me of how Nikke was originally marketed back when it released. The gacha is the next thing to get a slight revamp. There are now two types of banners, the classic 50-50 one with the second rate up guarantee and a base 0.7% drop rate, 80 pity, and the new type where the rate up character is the only SSR in the pool, but the drop rate has been severely gimped to a measly 0.1%, with a 100 pity counter. Now, in case you're someone that's still debating which one is better, let me just point that any gacha system where you don't have to deal with a 50-50 system is way better in comparison. You always roll this banner. This follows in the footsteps of Punishing Grey Raven, as if the UI didn't follow it already. The reason why the 100% banner is better is because if you look at it, the worst possible scenario for each type of banner is 100 versus 160. I know soft pity exists and that's gonna skew the numbers a little bit. But when you roll a gacha banner, you want the rate up character. You don't care about anything else. Not only does the guaranteed banner have a lower cost ceiling, it also makes your pull plans very easy to calculate. With the 0.1% SSR drop rate, yes, you're very likely going to be hitting pity almost every time. But since you already know the ceiling, you know that if you save 16,000 of these lean crystal things, you will guarantee a copy of Vidya, instead of jumping through mental gymnastics, calculating how many more crystals you need if you lose the coin flip and etc. Look, I got a copy of Vidya 12 hours before the banner was up. MiHoYo used to do this with their older games, specifically Honkai 3, but they've abandoned it since in favor of the coin flip mechanic. I also compared its rates in gacha systems to be eerily similar to Genshin's. But now I don't really have a problem. The point is not to copy how to monetize the game, because they actually did take the time to improve on it. Rerun banners have also gotten an overhaul. 2 rerun candidates are now selectable at a time, which reduces the amount of waiting each player has to do before snagging a copy. So 2 will be running simultaneously, but you can just choose the one you want. Again, this uses PGR's rerun system too. It's like they're copying all the good ideas. It reduces FOMO, and I think MiHoYo could learn a thing or two. Because over there, it's possible a character doesn't get a rerun in 1.5 years. One thing I want to see further improvements is the weapon system. You still can't get 4 or 5-star weapons in Snowbreak unless you specifically roll on the weapon banner. I think Withering Waves has a very fair system in this regard. Not only are 4-star weapons able to spook you in the character banners, any standard pulls can be used towards a selectable 5-star weapon. Let's be honest here, you don't want any of the standard characters. You'd rather spend your freebie tokens on weapons instead. Moving on to something else. One of my biggest complaints at the time was the logistics system. You can farm the logistics via one of the farming nodes, but one of the biggest issues is that the game also did event-exclusive logistics sets. These are equipable gear that comes in 3 sets a pop that's tucked away for sale in the events shop. They also have RNG substats, so I thought it made no sense restricting the player from farming them when it's possible that you get unlucky and you're stuck farming them because you just haven't gotten the right substats for your build yet. Except if you're not done by the time the event expires, the set becomes unavailable to farm. At the time, there was no mechanic or rerun event that lets you go back, so when I pulled Karia at the time, I literally just couldn't farm her best in slot logistics set because the patch was over. Well, I'm glad to announce that this problem has been mostly resolved. There is now an additional tab in the materials farming node that allows you to select a limited logistics set, and when you get enough currency, lets you exchange for one of the 3 officers in the squad at random. Ah, sweet fulfillment. But here's where they do even one better. Each patch also came with a free purchasable 4-star weapon. Same as the logistics, it would disappear into the ether once the event ended. Now, there is a separate farming mode where you can farm the currency to exchange for a past event weapon that you missed. That's just nice. One other aspect I think the game could have improved on is the variety and events. So I play shooter games from time to time, mainly Helldivers 2 at the moment, but I generally prefer when enemies are not bullet sponges, which probably explains why I couldn't get into Destiny. Anyways, during my original playtime, I felt that there wasn't enough variation other than shoot enemy until dead goals when it came to activities. There were some game modes like tower defense, and I understand that the non-open world design can limit creativity a little bit, like how you can't really do parkour obstacle courses without coming up with a whole new map. I mean, I'm not discounting that could have been my fault for not properly building out my operatives. I mean, I still don't know how rotations work in this game. But if you enjoy spraying lead all the time, then there wouldn't be any problems for you. There's also a couple new activities for each event cycle, not to mention some light puzzles or parkour sections during story campaigns. I realized that given the smaller scope and budget for the game at the time, it wouldn't be fair to compare it to the massive titles. Scheduling for each event patch has been reduced to 6 weeks instead of every 7. It's worth mentioning that when I first reviewed the game, the gap between patches was still 7, but was changed to 6 literally the next patch after that. 6 weeks does seem to be the norm for a lot of modern gacha games, so no complaints there. So, 6 months later, Snowbreak has changed a lot. Not only did it forge a new cultural identity, the aftermath of the rise in popularity has allowed them to secure a solid foothold in the gacha industry. It's a rare occurrence. Not a lot of these mobile games get a second chance. Now, that's all fun, but I myself probably still won't be playing this game. I'm personally just not really drawn in by the gunplay. Plus, most of the best skins that the game is known for are sold for real money. I mean, if I can't have it, then I don't care. Anyways, that's just a bit of my subjective take on the game. Don't listen to what I say though, because after a losing battle, ultimately, I can safely say, Snowbreak indeed deserves its success. So let me know if this video has somehow convinced you to dive into the degeneracy of the game, or what you think as an ongoing player. If you wish to see more gacha-related content like this, you know what to do. Thank you for watching, and as always, have fun out there.